Now, when I started my filming journey as a solo creator, trying to decide on a lens that would suit all of my needs, that was just as hard as deciding on the actual camera body itself. And now I wanted something that was affordable, reliable, and I wanted something with character. I also knew that I wasn't interested in zoom lenses, I wanted primes. And it took me 2 months before I actually landed on this, but this is a set that you may not have heard of. And after using these lenses for the past 100 days, I think it's time that I share an honest review, because I genuinely believe that this is one of the most underrated lens setups that's out there for anybody shooting solo. So these are the Samyang VAF prime lenses. So I have here specifically the 24mm, the 45mm, which is shooting me right now, and the 75mm all prime lenses. And as I mentioned before, I really think that these are the most underrated lenses for anybody that's shooting solo. Now, this isn't a sponsored video. I bought these with my own hard-earned cash. And after 100 days, I just wanted to give you guys my honest verdict and opinion on them. Now, when I was trying to decide on what lenses I want, I really had 3 non-negotiables. They had to be affordable, it had to be lightweight, and it had to be something that I could use entirely by myself. So that ruled out a lot of the cheap prime lenses with terrible autofocus and really tacky kind of housing on one end. But on the other end, there was a cinema primes that didn't have autofocus, were really big and bulky, and you needed to have a full rig out on your camera just so you could use it. And if you're filming yourself, it's pretty hard to focus pull. Now let's just get the price out of the way first, because I know that this is a question everybody has when it comes to buying gear. Now, I got these 3 lenses, including the one shooting me right now, for a total of 980 Aussie bucks, or roughly 690 US dollars, all from Facebook Marketplace. Now, just for context, the Sigma 24-70 2.8 art lens comes in at around 1,700 bucks, and that's on sale. And yes, I know that there's other zoom lenses available around the 800 to 1,000 Australian dollar mark that are lower tier. That is an option, but instead I get 3 fast prime lenses at T1.9 each with their own little character. And now I know so many out there are sitting there saying, why not just get the 24-70 and be done with it? One lens, easy peasy. You're not always taking lenses on and off the camera. But guys, I love the look of primes. And I also love how they force you to really move around and think about what you're doing with the camera. And if you want that prime look, you know, that separation, the certain compression and the character, this is genuinely hard to beat dollar for dollar, especially when you're the one carrying everything, mounting everything, swapping everything, doing everything all by yourself. There has to be a trade-off, and only you can really know what is going to best suit your needs with what you want, your workflow, and your style. So it's a choice that you really have to make for yourself. Alrighty, so let's get into the nitty-gritty. If I could only take one of these 3 lenses out with me, it's going to be the 45mm. Now, I know that the Nifty 50 is like everyone's go-to when it comes to primes, and that's what everyone suggests, but I really genuinely love this 45mm length. So if you're shooting solo or you're new to primes, this 45mm is such a good lens to learn on. Obviously you can't zoom, so it's going to force you to move your feet and actually think about your composition instead of just standing there and twisting a ring. You know, if there's nobody else there to help you, you really have to be sitting there considering where you're going to be if you're filming solo, where everything's going to end up, because this really matters with how the end product looks. But this 45mm I find has such a natural look to it. It really has no distortion or warping. It is super versatile. It's enough for me to get wide to medium shots, and the T1.9, the subject separation is super smooth. So this has become my default lens, I would say, for more than 80 to 85% of my shooting over the past 100 days. All right, so let's now talk about the 24mm lens, which is roughly what your phone defaults to when you open your camera app. It has a much wider view, gives you a lot more context, and there's a lot more scale involved. Now, wide lenses can definitely feel intimidating, especially when you're starting out, because there is really so much more in your frame to manage. So my advice to be, especially when you're shooting alone, is to practice filling out your foreground and your background with something that's just a little bit interesting, even if it's just a hand or a bag or something in your shot that kind of doesn't make it feel completely empty. Giving it a little bit of depth perception will go a long way when using this 24mm prime. And now, because these lenses are so small and compact, I can get some pretty low angles and some crazy shots just resting the camera on the ground or on my bag, on a jumper or something like that, so I don't damage anything obviously, but I'm not needing as many mounts and I don't need as many fancy things or a crew to help me rig it up. And it's also very forgiving at handheld. Like even if your hands aren't rock steady and smooth like mine because I don't practice it enough. But this matters a lot when you walk around vlogging or you're trying to get handheld footage without it looking like you're jumping up and down on a trampoline. The 24mm is super forgiving in that regard. And finally, we have the 75mm. And to be honest, this is the one that I would use the least. And I will get into that shortly. But the background blur at T1.9, it is super creamy, it is delicious, and that telephoto compression really does bring in something genuinely pleasing to the image. So as far as this kit goes, I would tell the fellow solo shooter to save this one for last if you were trying to deliberate on getting 3 or 2. Get comfortable with a 45 or a 24mm first, because the 75mm rewards more deliberate, planned shots, rather than reactive, forced ones. And planning gets a lot harder when you're on set shooting with the 75. You know, close-up details with this lens, it has a really nice, organic, tactile feel, I guess you can say. And you just can't really get that with the smaller lens. Okay, now before I get into all the technical quirks and mumbo jumbo, there's 3 things that I believe have genuinely made this easy to live with, film with, and use non-stop over the past 100 days. And if you're a one-person crew like me, this stuff is going to matter more than the spec sheets ever will. So firstly, they are all identical in size and weight, coming in at 280 grams and 72 millimeters long. So swapping these lenses in the field or at home or wherever you are, it only takes a couple of seconds. And if you're a gimbal user, the same size and weight means you're not having to constantly re-rig and rebalance your gimbal, which is the most annoying thing about owning a gimbal. And secondly, they all share the same 58mm filter thread size. So if you're buying NDs and you're buying things like that, you only need to buy one to screw onto all 3. So that alone there can save you some real money and some real space in a small camera bag when you're a solo shooter. And thirdly, there's a couple of really useful built-in tally lights on the lens itself. So when you're filming by yourself, with no one around to check the camera for you and tell you that everything's good, you know instantly by looking at the lens if you're actually rolling or not. So there's no more nailing a take and then realizing that you never hit record in the first place. All right, so let's get into some technical stuff, and something that all cinema lens reviews always check: focus breathing. This is when you get those subtle zooms back and forth as you rack focus. So the focus breathing hasn't really mattered too much to me, to be honest, because I'm not doing a lot of narrative work or I'm not doing a lot of intense focus pulls in my footage. And that's genuinely pretty hard to do as a solo creator anyway when you're filming yourself. But if you're doing mostly autofocus stuff or just talking head, vlog content, or most things that people are doing as creators on YouTube, I say you can pretty much largely skip worrying about the focus breathing. But if it's something that you really are concerned about, consider that with these lenses. Now the 24mm naturally breathes a lot less than the 75, but even the 45 does give you a bit of breathing issues when you are going from background subject to foreground subject, background subject to foreground subject. You can definitely see it. But if I'm just doing tracking shots or generally walking around filming, to be honest, it hasn't really bothered me. But if you are doing a lot of focus pulls and that's something that is in your repertoire of filming, it's something to consider before buying these lenses. All right, so let's now talk about autofocus, because being a solo creator and having reliable autofocus, it wasn't really optional for me, it was a must-have. And over the past 100 days, I've relied on my autofocus, I'm gonna say pretty much every single time I've gone out to film. In fact, I'm gonna say every single time. Whether it's just easily tapping on my face for a talking headshot like this, or I'm walking around a scene, walking behind trees, whatever it is, the autofocus always stays locked on, especially on the 24 and the 45. And it only hunts if I'm moving back and forth from the camera quite a bit and being a bit silly with it. And just for reference, so you understand what settings I got on my camera, here is my focus settings that I'm currently using on my ZV-E1. I found these settings to be the best with these series of lenses for the type of work that I've been doing. Okay, now optically, I feel like these have hit a really nice sweet spot for me. You know, a lot of modern lenses that I was looking at, they had such a clinical look, or they were overly sharp, or the skin tones and flares looked a little bit funny. You're looking at vintage glass, that can be super soft, it can be super expensive. I've just found that these lenses are sharp enough to capture good textures and good details, but they're also smooth enough to get nice flares, beautiful skin tones, and they just honestly have this look of their own to me. It's like they just give you a nice, clean, fresh slate to work with when you take your image, add a camera, onto DaVinci Resolve. It's a pleasure to work with. Okay, so now if we put all these images together, you can just see how different they actually are from each other going through the different focal lengths. Each one truly has its own unique attribute to offer. So for example, just take a look at the difference here between the 24mm and the 75mm side by side. They're completely different lenses with completely different purposes. Now, everything that I've said so far about these lenses is really, really good, but are they perfect? No, they're not perfect. You know, if you just look at the build, it's high grade composite plastic, it's not metal. So they've been remodeled using the housing from old photo lens system that they had. And I guess that's what keeps it so light and nimble and easy. But it is a trade-off in terms of build quality. Now, I'm not entirely sure how old my lenses are or how much use they'd had before I got them prior to me picking them up off Marketplace. But for all the buttons, they work really well. The focus ring is still perfect. It's not sticky, it's nice and smooth across all three of the lenses. And I haven't had any issues with those. The only thing that does get me sometimes is just how plasticky they can feel. But to be honest, I would rather that and keep my setup very light overall and have the same weight across all three lenses so it doesn't feel like I've got a new camera or have to rebalance anything. To me, that's still a win. Even though maybe it's a negative for some, to me, it doesn't matter too much because I take care of them. I'm not throwing them around, so they're not getting damaged. Now, obviously I spoke about this before, but the focus breathing is quite dramatic, especially when you're doing those bigger focus pulls on the 45 and the 75. Or if you're switching between your subject and your background quite fast in autofocus. The 75mm is definitely working the hardest when it comes to hunting and when it comes to looking for the autofocus. So if you're trying to race around as a solo creator, getting handheld footage with this 75mm, you're probably gonna get frustrated as hell. So here's my honest split with this. I would say get this trio of lenses if you are a solo shooter and you're budget conscious and you want real prime character lenses without needing a crew, without needing a truckload of gear, or without spending 10 grand to get the look. But I would say skip it if you're doing a lot of heavy manual narrative work where you're doing, you know, a lot of focus pulling from near to far, and where focus breathing is really going to matter a lot to your work. But for the vast majority of people, I dare say that it's not going to be a deal breaker. So for me, running this channel entirely by myself, filming everything entirely by myself, doing everything on my own, I'm going to say that this trio of lenses has really hit a sweet spot for me with price, with its image quality, and its versatility. And I know a lot of you are still going to sit there and argue about just getting a zoom lens and be done with it. And I get it, you know, that's fair. But honestly, guys, I just love primes and I love the image that I've been getting from these. I just don't really feel like I need the zoom lens. And we are truly in the golden age of filmmaking right now. Like, you think about it, we have access to so much gear that lets us create cinema quality images and footage on a next to nothing budget entirely on our own. You go back 15, 20 years ago, that crap was impossible. Right, so we don't need to be having our gear hold us back from making things. There are so many awesome things available and out there that are good enough for everybody. And so if you guys out there are building your first solo setup or looking to upgrade, I can definitely recommend getting these lenses to try. But I am interested to hear what you guys have to think about these. Drop a comment below on what your go-to lens setup is, what you find good about it, what you hate about it. Or maybe you're just deciding to look at something new and you thought you'd check out this. I'd love to find out what's happening with you guys. Check out the Create Daily Discord in the description below. The link will be in there. Come and join us, share your work. We would love to have you there. And hopefully this video gave you a little bit of insight into these three lenses, how they look, and if it's something that maybe you've been curious about, maybe it's a signal to buy them or to not buy them. Now, go and film something. I'm gonna go put this video together. So, you know what that means. I'll catch you later.